Oh, I should also mention that Jim of Salesforce is not able to make it today. Sends his apologies. He had something come up last week, so was not able to travel. So I've got a little extra time in the presentation than I had anticipated. So I've included a few more personal thoughts that I'll put at the end of the talk. The overall structure here, and I'll do a quick introduction of myself here in a little bit before we dive in, but I thought we could do just a quick overview of the AI Alliance, when and how it came to be, some of the members, talk about the structure of the Alliance and some of the projects that we've started, and then talk about a specific affiliated project. So I'm Adam Pingel. I'm with IBM. I've been at IBM for about 2.5 years. One of the things I've been working on a lot in the last few months is the release of a new set of Granite models. We just announced that last Monday, and that is an affiliated project within the Alliance. I'll spend a little bit of time talking about that, but the models and the community that we're building around them. And then as far as the personal touch, I put this at the end so we can cut it a little bit if we run out of time. But I thought I might just kind of connect with some of you in the audience a little bit more in explaining how I got here, why I think the Alliance is important, why I was drawn to this role earlier this year. And lastly, I'll have a little bit to say about the Alliance membership, that process. So before I dive into the overview, I will just say a couple words. So I mentioned I've been IBM. I'm a part of IBM Research. I joined 2.5 years ago to do accelerated discovery, things like drug discovery and material science. And like a lot of other companies, IBM really doubled down on large language models a year and a half ago or so. So I was a part of that, and then worked on Watson Code Assistant last year, and earlier this year joined up with the AI Alliance. I'm a resident of Raleigh. This is one of the easier conferences I've ever traveled to, about 2.5 miles away. I've been here for about 5 years. I moved out here to join LexisNexis. Actually, I was already a part of LexisNexis, but they had acquired the startup I was at in 2017, so I moved out here in 2019, right before COVID, to take a bigger leadership role with that company. I'll say more about my path to AI and open source later, but to dive into the Alliance, this is one of our big theme slides. I think every member would readily agree to this. AI technology is too important to be shaped by a few. And AI technology will transform everyone's lives, so we all have a vested interest in it. I think that's a pretty easy mission to sign up for. So the Alliance has been around for less than a year. It was last December 5th, that we launched with 56 founding organizations. The Alliance brings together organizations, people, and resources to accelerate open innovation, technology development, and adoption. So that original map of 56, less than a year ago, has expanded. We're up over 120 at this point. We've got 20 countries represented, and as we say on the left here, we've got members from academia, commercial, research, and nonprofits. It's a pretty interesting mix. All of the meetings that we go to, there's often representatives from all of those categories, and it makes for a lot of really interesting conversations. And the sentence there on the left, our core belief that AI is open, our core belief in AI that is open is the tie that binds us despite our differences. So there definitely are differences. We are coming, this 120 organizations, we're coming at this from a lot of different angles. There's a lot of diversity. But it's really remarkable how easy we can find things to talk about and ways to work together. So to dive a little bit into the structure and projects of the Alliance. So at the highest level, we think about 3 pillars of members, of people in the Alliance: builders, enablers, and advocates. Builders build, release, and support open technologies for AI, including software models, data sets, and related tooling, especially in language and other modalities essential to the health, sustainability, and prosperity of society. So this is the the category that I most identify with. I still think of myself as kind of a startup person, despite the fact that I've worked in large organizations for about 7 years now. And the focus area that I'm a part of, we really do think of ourselves as builders. We are, a lot of us, actively making commits, working on code bases on a daily basis. We're also composed of enablers who enable developers and organizations to adopt open technologies with advocacy, tutorials, community support, education, and training, and use case demonstrations. And this is a role that I've been playing a little bit with the IBM Granite affiliate project. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And that's a common kind of role that we see Alliance members play. It's a critical role. And lastly, advocates who advocate for a vibrant open technology ecosystem in AI to enable broad benefits, address challenges, and foster trust and safety with organizational and societal leaders, policy and regulatory bodies, and the public. So to dive in one layer deeper into the structure, there's a slide I probably won't show. It's in an appendix that talks a little bit more about some of the shared infrastructure. So that includes a steering committee and marketing and community support. But in the interest of time, I'm going to omit that because I think for the most part, I'm assuming that most of you are interested in how members interact with the Alliance. And they do so through the focus areas. There are 6 of them. I'm the co-chair of the 3rd one. So let me just enumerate those for you quickly here. So we start with skills and education, which supports global AI skills building, education, and exploratory research. The second one is trust and safety. They create benchmarks, tools, and methodologies to ensure and evaluate high quality and safe AI. The third one, that's the one I meet with every Tuesday at 11 o'clock. We build and advance efficient and capable software frameworks for model builders and AI application developers. The fourth one is hardware enablement. That group fosters a vibrant AI hardware accelerator ecosystem through software. And maybe I'll just mention as a footnote, both Intel and AMD are members of the Alliance. The fifth one is foundation models and data. They enable an ecosystem of open foundation models and data sets for diverse modalities. And finally, advocacy, which advocates for regulatory policies that create a healthy open ecosystem for AI. So to flesh that out a little bit more still, we could talk about projects. There are 2 tiers of projects, 2 tiers for Alliance projects, affiliated and core. And the bar for affiliated is a little lower. It's sort of an easier place for these to start, so I'm going to talk about that first. So they're not managed by the AI Alliance, but we do highlight them as contributing to open, safe, and responsible AI. We encourage individuals to contribute to, we encourage individuals to contribute to affiliated projects. So I'm going to talk a little bit at the end about how an organization might join, but I think this path of individuals contributing to these open projects in many ways is sort of a really easy way to get started. And we say the contribution to affiliated project is governed as set up by the affiliate project as opposed to the AI Alliance. Just to mention the 6 organizations that have affiliated projects below. So IBM, we have the IBM Granite models. I'm going to speak about that in a little bit. MBZU AI, Last Mile AI, Red Hat, Cornell, and Quantsite. And we've got more about each of those. If you go to the alliance.ai/our-work, you can find out a little bit more about those. And then moving on to the core projects, same URL. Core projects address substantial cross-community challenges and are an opportunity for individual contributors and members to collaborate, build, and make an impact on the future of AI. Core projects are managed directly by the AI Alliance. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the governance that we apply there, but I won't read all of these, but just to give you a taste, obviously the advocacy, these are grouped by focus area. The advocacy core projects are of a different flavor. They're statements and a response. The others take the form, for the most part, of GitHub repositories with corresponding microsites. And I'll show a little bit more about those. here. So we established a pattern in the trust and safety work group several months ago. We're just using, I think, Jekyll to build a little microsite, publish it with GitHub pages. And so that living guide is the most mature at this point. We started one in Focus Area 3, which I'm co-chair of, just a month or two ago. So we're getting a lot more content there. We've got a few good articles with a few more to come very shortly. And I would love to have contributions from the community to that guide. And then, so that one I show on the right there. We've got contributions already in place from Intel, IBM, and a startup called Itomatic. And we have content on the way from Neo4j, more from IBM and Meta. And I should mention too, my co-chair, Amit Sangani of Focus Area 3, is with Meta. So he brings a lot of the stuff they're working on, and he's able to tell us about Llama Stack, the Llama models. We're I think, pretty well plugged into those models and that ecosystem. So we have, at the alliance.ai/contribute, we've got a little bit more about the way that the core projects are governed. And in many cases, the affiliate projects are governed very similarly. That's true of the Granite models, for instance, and of the Granite community that we're creating, the repositories for the living guides. And I won't read all of this, but we do have enforcement of the developer certificate of origin in place, for instance, and Apache 2 is the license for code and model weights. Documentation of Creative Commons and data is CDLA permissive. And just mention, of course, we have a code of conduct. Those links are available on this page and at that URL. And we want to be clear that we have clear guidance on competition law. So that's present on the site as well. Okay. So to dive into the Granite Models affiliated project, I'll say a little bit about the models and more about the community that we're trying to build around them. So there was a flurry of activity it was a week ago, Monday morning. It was at 12:01 a.m., in fact, that the press release went out announcing several new members of the Granite model family. There were several in the language models, as well as Guardian models for hate, abuse, profanity filtering, and Accelerator for speculative decoding. We've had the ones on the right for a while. Those are code, time series, and geospatial models. And I'll have a lot more links about and details about that in a few slides. But what I want to talk about for a little bit is the community that we're trying to build around these. So we started a new GitHub organization called, it's the IBM-Granite-community, with several repositories that for the most part correspond to cookbooks. So I remember the first cookbook I had was in 1998. There was a Perl cookbook. As far as I know, that was the first cookbook that was published, the technical cookbook. And I had to double check to make sure that that was still a thing before we committed to this naming. But yes, in fact, Hugging Face and Langchain still are writing cookbooks with recipes. So we're doing that. We're following that analogy, and we take the analogy a little bit further than what I've seen. And I'll say specifically about what that means. But so we started with the code and the time series cookbooks because we had already had those models published a couple of months ago. So a recipe in a cookbook corresponds to a functioning Python notebook. We think that, and we do have automated testing in place to try to catch errors early and keep these things as functional as possible. We think that's the best way to get potential adopters up and running and be open about how these things are intended to be used. So we started with code and time series, added after that some domain-specific cookbooks for finance and legal. Now those are really underdeveloped at this point. I come from a legal tech background. That's so something I'm looking forward to building out with the publicly available data and models, Granite specifically. But one of the things we found pretty quickly is that we'd kind of missed a step here, which was there's a tension when we're building these domain-specific cookbooks. we really want to dive into the details. I think ultimately the domain is not just a skin. It's not just a piece of data you swap out one Hugging Face data set for another. But over time, the domain really should drive the architecture as much as anything. So those are necessarily going to get really kind of embroiled in the domain. But there's still a place for more bite-sized morsels. How can you demonstrate a technique and architecture? So we did that with a new cookbook we're calling the Snack Cookbook. So here we are extending the cooking analogy. These are bite-sized recipes that you can do in hopefully well under 15 minutes. The domain-specific ones, we want to be quick too. I think that's a key measurement for the consumability of these assets. But the snacks are going to be especially fast. And they're going to be a little bit more focused on the technique than the result, because they don't have a clear domain. Like in one case, for instance, we're using a State of the Union address from a couple years ago. So it doesn't really qualify as a legal example. Single document, bite size. In another case, I'm using a 200-year-old book from Thoreau to show document summarization. Probably not a business use case that anybody has, but it does demonstrate a couple of techniques for document summarization. And then lastly, the other way that we're extending the cooking analogy a little bit is the kitchen. So if a recipe is the function that takes ingredients and produces something delicious to eat, then the kitchen is the set of appliances that you use to do that, appliances and tools. So these, the oven, the refrigerator, the mixer, what's the analog? These would be the things like the inference services or fine-tuning libraries or services that we're showing off. Frameworks like Hugging Face or Llama Index, vector databases. So hopefully that makes sense. I've had some positive feedback on those extensions to the analogy so far, but I would love to hear what you think of that. And then on the right, I just show the table of contents for the Snack Cookbook. Would love to hear your feedback. We've tried to make these things function in Colab wherever possible. We're almost to 100% in that regard there. I think the consumability of something that can be run in Colab is just a lot higher if you can click on it. But of course, we want this to be functioning locally as well. And we've made not a small investment to make sure that these things are tested in a real CI/CD pipeline. We're still working on that, but the basics are in place. I think we're going to be able to catch a lot of errors a lot earlier. Okay, so this is a Granite slide. This is something that was a deck that was put together a couple of weeks ago. I won't spend a lot of time on this. On the right, we have it's a picture of the technical paper. It's 30 some odd pages. I have the link to that in a couple of slides. But what I wanted to just emphasize here is the fact that this has been, the model is released under an Apache 2 license. And the full transparency on training data, that specifically is in Appendix B of the technical paper. It's a really nice list of high quality data sources, if you want to check that out. And, 10 years ago, I was involved with helping create one of those. And I can say a little bit about that towards the end. But I think it's really apparent the care that was taken like these models in selecting the high quality data. And as one example, and this is not a random selection of the 8. I show this one specifically to highlight the fact that we are giving the community instructions for how to modify the model, how to adapt it to a domain. Now, this is just a snack. It's a little bit silly. Talk like a pirate is a little bit of a punchline at this point, but it works as far as showing you've clearly changed the model, because most models don't do that by default. So we could take the smaller of the Granite language models. We're using the Hugging Face SFT trainer to show that we can expose it to a bunch of different data, which we have generated in a previous step, and then you get a different model. And we even include how you might publish that. So of course, and we've got a note in there, consult your legal counsel before you were to do it, before you do anything, publishing a model, take care with the data that you use to adapt the model. But we feel really good that we're operating within the spirit and of open source. We're being transparent about the data. The Apache 2 license is very clear, time tested. And again, we've got instructions for how you would do that. I went through this last night, and you can find the result on my Hugging Face page. And a few of the links that I've mentioned during the talk, the technical paper. So the first one is the Granite Docs site. There's a really nice entry point that includes a playground if you just want to get to a place where you can prompt the model and see how well it does. There's a great way to do that on that site. There's also just an overview of where you can get the model and links to these recipes that I was just talking about. The technical paper is available on GitHub. We've got a responsible use guide at the URL in the middle there. And the models the weights are available on Hugging Face. Now we also, concurrently with announcing these models, announced that we had expanded the availability of the models like we hadn't before. So while previously we had the models available on watsonx and Ollama, I think the Ollama last time kind of lagged a while. This time we were there on the day of the announcement, the models were available on Ollama. And NVIDIA announced the availability of the models as well on last Monday, and Replicate. And just a couple more links to mention. This is a reiteration of the GitHub organization. It's IBM-Granite-community. That's where you can find the entry points to all of the cookbooks. And then lastly, there's a QR code and a link below to the Discord server that we set up for this community. So would love to see you there, either through the Discord or file an issue on the repositories. Would love your feedback on how well these recipes have worked for you. And again, I bring this up, just to remind ourselves, this is a talk about the AI Alliance. The last few slides have been about a project. This is an IBM project that we think fits the spirit and the mission of the AI Alliance in our openness and transparency, the responsible use of AI. Okay, so we've got, I want to talk a little bit about membership at the end, but I will spend just a couple slides talking about some of my personal experiences and how I think that, for me personally, motivates why we need something like this, and hopefully you can relate to some of these points. So I mentioned that I've been here for 5 years. I came from a startup that got bought by a company that was here, and I moved out here 5 years ago. But in preparing for this talk, I just spent some time thinking about, all right, I'm talking about AI, but it's at a conference that's dedicated to the theme of openness, and the Alliance is a lot about openness. Where in my history did those things meet? Because they really do, weirdly, have a strong affinity, and I don't know that that's necessarily true of the world, but I'm curious to hear some of your experiences with it. So for me, I go back about 30 years to 1995. That's when a lot of these things came together, and for me. And it's also, I bring up 1995 because that's the last time I remember things being this crazy, things evolving this quickly. Those few years from 95 through the late 90s were just nuts. And I think what we're seeing now, I think it kind of outstrips it. I almost am reluctant to say it, but this is even crazier. And I think it's crazier in some ways because, not to take anything away from whoever was around 30 years ago, but it was kind of a simpler extrapolation. You could kind of just extend the curves, and there was a clear path. We were going to miniaturize things, price points were going to drop, compute and data was going to be much more highly available. I think now we're struggling through is a much more of a qualitative difference. Yeah, we know the models are going to get better and they're going to get cheaper and faster, but I don't know that that's only one small piece of predicting how it's going to affect the economy overall. For instance, 30 years ago, we knew we were going to be able to buy books online and probably a bunch of other stuff. And we knew eventually we were probably going to have pocket computers on which we could order those books and they would just show up, and maybe buy a drone someday. But yeah, 1995 is where, for me, open source and AI really came together. So I took a course. I was an undergrad. At the beginning of 1995, I was a junior in college, and I took my first AI course. And we learned out of the AI, A Modern Approach, Russell and Norvig's textbook. I think it's on its 4th edition right now. It had just come out, I think, that week in January of 1995. And in Appendix B of that book, Russell Norvig has, and I'm pretty sure it was him, he has it's a little instruction that says, hey, we've got some Lisp that implements a lot of these algorithms. Here's an email address. Send an email with the word help in the subject or the body, and we'll send you back instructions for where to get it. So it's interesting to think that the email address was the one thing they felt they could invest in that was going to be around for a few years. So I remember checking it out at that time. I don't remember the license of that hunk of code. I think at the time, licenses were still coalescing. There was a lot of, there would be a copyright notice free for academic use. There was a lot of kind of tribal lore about how you would write a license that allowed the people to share it the way you wanted to share it. But it coincided perfectly, I realized in making this slide. February of 1995, as I was taking this AI class, was the first version of Apache. So in my experience, these things were happening at exactly the same time. And then I bought a copy of Red Hat later that year. This is my only prop. I have a 3.5-inch floppy. This is actually not of that first version, but of a version from a few years later. I think, thankfully, I probably threw that first version out, as I should have. These things were all happening at the same time. And in the years that followed, yes, there was the dot-com boom and the bust, but it was clear that the data and compute were coming online as we had hoped. Not only that, but GPUs were showing up, this specialized hardware, initially for gaming, and they were awesome for gaming, but I think there was a pretty substantial community that knew that these GPUs were someday going to be used for a much broader set of applications beyond gaming. We didn't know when, but it was clear that there were a large class of important problems that would map well onto the kinds of capabilities that GPUs has. We didn't know exactly what year that would happen, but it's not like I made an investment with that hunch. I really missed out there, I suppose. But in hindsight, that idea was floating around. We've heard about the winters. I don't know if there's a canonical definition of when the winters started and stopped. I think it's a little fuzzy. But I do remember in 1996 bringing up neural networks in an interview, not getting the job, and being advised to go to grad school, which is sort of a combination of a compliment and an insult. I did ultimately take their advice 6 years later. But it was, at the time, with a couple of exceptions, bringing up those topics in an interview was pretty risky. It's not something that they were going to make an investment in, most companies. But in terms of the relationship between AI and open source software, I think AI still had from the mid 90s, I think up through the late 90s and a little bit beyond, it was lagging a little bit. It still felt academic, whereas operating systems, web servers, those were really getting their act together when it came to openness. It took a little while for AI to get there. And just a few more thoughts. I won't read through all of these, but I think, et cetera. Another 20 years happened, and eventually AI became what it is today in little fits and starts. Each one of those things, these I consider some of the victories. There's 3 or 4 failures for everything that I've got listed here. But I think this has been really hard, even for a company as big as IBM, where I now am, it's 250,000 people or something like that. I think there's still a feeling that if we could bring together, as we have 120 organizations and maybe more as we go forward, that's really the best way to solve some of these really, really difficult problems. So they're not just technical. There's a lot of deep technical problems still, but there are also these issues that can be solved by, as we saw earlier, advocacy and enablement, trust and safety. This is where we need to do a lot of work. And I think that by bringing these organizations together as we have in the Alliance, I think we've got a good, and focusing on the projects and the way we collaborate, I think we've got a good basis for helping to really make an impact on some of these really difficult problems. So I'll just say a couple of words about the membership process, and then if there's questions, I'm happy to take some. So the thing I'll say about membership, I think, as I mentioned earlier, making a contribution as an individual to some of the projects that we now have as GitHub repositories, that's a great place to start if you want to get a sense of how we're working. However, if you want to take another step further, some of the things we're looking for are alignment with the AI Alliance's values and its mission to cultivate safe and open science. We're looking for a commitment to undertake significant projects. So that's part of why I mentioned that contributing to the projects as they're currently defined that would be a great way to signal that commitment. If you could, check it out, do a couple pull requests, that's a clear signal. Thirdly, the contribution to the diversity of perspectives within the AI Alliance. I mentioned we've got universities, commercial entities, nonprofits, as well as geographic distribution, as well as kind of domain and technical stack diversity. And then finally, a reputation and activity within the wider community of AI builders, advocates, educators, and users. So as we review these applications, the focus area leaders, kind of anything that sort of helps kind of provide good examples of that reputation in the community is really helpful. And then this is the last slide I have. You can, we do have on the website, thealliance.ai, if you want to, there's a form that can be filled out if you do want to have a conversation about membership. This describes, at a high level, I won't read through this, but it's basically apply, make an application, the application is processed, and then there's an onboarding. So I will leave you all with this, and